Έχουν περάσει 103 χρόνια από την πρώτη μέρα λειτουργίας του και 75 από τη στιγμή που κατασκευάστηκε εδώ το πρώτο αυτοκίνητο. Το εργοστάσιο της BMW στο Μόναχο είναι ένα από τα ελάχιστα εργοστάσια αυτοκινήτων παγκοσμίως που βρίσκεται εντός του αστικού ιστού. Η ιστορία του εργοστασίου με κάποιον τρόπο διηγείται και την ιστορία της Γερμανίας, μιας χώρας που σε όλη τη διάρκεια του 20ου αιώνα συνέδεσε στενά τη μοίρα της τόσο με την αυτοκινητοβιομηχανία όσο και με το αυτοκίνητο ως κουλτούρα ζωής και μετακίνησης. Σήμερα, σε μια κρίσιμη στιγμή για την οικονομία της Γερμανίας, που βρίσκεται σε ύφεση εδώ και 2 χρόνια για πρώτη φορά μετά από δεκαετίες, οι αναλυτές στρέφουν το βλέμμα και στην αυτοκινητοβιομηχανία, έναν από τους πιο ισχυρούς κινητήριους μοχλούς ανάπτυξης της χώρας, για να καταλάβουν τι πήγε ή τι συνεχίζει να πηγαίνει λάθος για την ατμομηχανή της Ευρώπης.
The German industry has underperformed in the last, let's say, 2 or 3 years.
There is going to be structural change. There's no way around that. And I think that's a message that politicians don't really like.
We need to increase growth potential. That means we need to become more productive, we need to increase labor supply, and we will work on that.
Well, what I can tell you is we can produce these cars in that time, but the question is, will the consumers also buy them?
There is a huge demand for qualified personnel all over the different industries.
Colleagues with more knowledge of AI and so on will be needed.
Now with the tariffs, there is another risk that this very small growth of between 0 and 0.5% will clearly evaporate back into a recession.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Είμαι ο Απόστολος Μαγκυριάδης. Καλώς ήρθατε στον Επίλογο. Εδώ και 2 χρόνια η γερμανική οικονομία, η ατμομηχανή της Ευρώπης, βιώνει μια στασιμότητα. Εμείς ήρθαμε στο Βερολίνο και μιλήσαμε με πολιτικούς και αναλυτές για να δούμε το πώς η Γερμανία μπορεί να αντιμετωπίσει κάποια από τα δομικά της προβλήματα. Επισκεφτήκαμε και το Μόναχο για να δούμε το πώς η αυτοκινητοβιομηχανία προσπαθεί να προσαρμοστεί στη νέα εποχή της ηλεκτροκίνησης. Το εργοστάσιο της BMW στο Μόναχο ξεκίνησε να λειτουργεί το 1922. 37 χρόνια αφού ο μηχανικός Καρλ Μπέντς κατασκεύασε το πρώτο αυτοκίνητο στον κόσμο στην πόλη Μάνχαιμ, 370 χιλιόμετρα βορειοδυτικά του Μονάχου. Την ίδρυση της BMW ακολούθησε αυτή της Mercedes το 1926, της Audi το 1932 και της Volkswagen το 1937. Την ίδια περίοδο ξεκινάει η κατασκευή των αυτοκινητοδρόμων που ενώνουν τις γερμανικές πόλεις, των περίφημων Autobahn, που σήμερα σχηματίζουν ένα από τα πιο εκτεταμένα και πυκνά δίκτυα αυτοκινητοδρόμων με συνολικό μήκος 13.192 χιλιόμετρα. Από το πρώτο καρμπιρατέρ και το πρώτο σπορ αυτοκίνητο της Porsche το 1948 μέχρι τον σκαραβαίο της δεκαετίας του 50 και το σύστημα ABS τη δεκαετία του 80, η γερμανική αυτοκινητοβιομηχανία εξελισσόταν διαρκώς με πρωτοποριακές και καινοτόμες ιδέες. Σήμερα το εργοστάσιο της BMW στο Μόναχο υπόκειται σε μια άλλη μεγάλη αλλαγή, η οποία θα κοστίσει 650 εκατομμύρια ευρώ. Οι εγκαταστάσεις του μεταμορφώνονται με τέτοιο τρόπο έτσι ώστε από το 2027 και μετά να παράγουν αποκλειστικά ηλεκτρικά αυτοκίνητα.
We are already producing fully electric cars. We are producing combustion engine, plug-in hybrids and full electric cars on one line here in plant Munich. And of course, yes, we will produce fully electric cars by 2027. And therefore, we had a complete structural change in the plant. So we are, from our structure for the future, we are prepared for a fully electric car, the Neue Klasse, which we will produce here in 2027.
Ο Jochen Dierberger μας ξεναγεί στο εργοστάσιο που βρίσκεται μέσα στην πόλη του Μονάχου. 500.000 τετραγωνικά μέτρα καλύπτει το εργοστάσιο, ενώ η επιφάνεια παραγωγής φτάνει τα 620.000 τετραγωνικά μέτρα, και αυτό γιατί έχουν δημιουργηθεί διαφορετικοί όροφοι για να χωρέσει η παραγωγή. Περίπου 750 φορτηγά παίρνουν κάθε μέρα την πύλη του εργοστασίου, παραδίδοντας εξαρτήματα. Από τη γραμμή παραγωγής μήκους 3,5 χιλιόμετρων βγαίνουν σχεδόν 1.000 οχήματα καθημερινά. Και ενώ η παραγωγή είναι για το μεγαλύτερο μέρος της αυτοματοποιημένη και χρησιμοποιούνται εκατοντάδες ρομπότ, 6.500 άνθρωποι 50 εθνικοτήτων εργάζονται εδώ. Ανάμεσά τους και πολλοί Έλληνες.
Εδώ τώρα βρισκόμαστε στο τελικό φινίρισμα της καρότσας. Εδώ είμαι υπεύθυνος εγώ, έχω γύρω στα 45 άτομα. Γίνονται τελικές δουλειές που δεν μπορούν να γίνουν από τα ρομπότ, ο τελικός έλεγχος της καρότσας.
Ο Σάκης Καραγιάννης δουλεύει 28 χρόνια στην BMW και είναι προϊστάμενος του τμήματος όπου φτιάχνεται η καρότσα του αυτοκινήτου, ενώ η Αθανασία Στοηλά επιβλέπει τα 75 άτομα που κάνουν τον τελικό έλεγχο πριν τα αυτοκίνητα φύγουν από το εργοστάσιο. Η αυτοματοποίηση έχει επιτρέψει να φτιάχνονται στη σειρά διαφορετικά μοντέλα, ηλεκτρικά και μη. Η BMW παρήγαγε 2.513.830 αυτοκίνητα το 2024, από τα οποία το 17% ήταν πλήρως ηλεκτρικά, ποσοστό που το 2021 ήταν 4,8% και το 2013 0,1%.
This is the today's Generation 5 battery, which we assemble here in Munich in the today's BMW i4. This engine is on the rear axle of the BMW i4 and has a power of around about 340 horsepower, fully electric. And our top model, the BMW i4 M50, has around about 544 horsepower with a lot of acceleration, a lot of driving fun, driving pleasure. There will come a complete new battery system, new cells and a new battery, which gives you a higher increase of the loading speed, charging speed, and of course a bigger distance for driving.
Συνολικά η παραγωγή ηλεκτρικών αυτοκινήτων από τις γερμανικές αυτοκινητοβιομηχανίες έχει αυξηθεί εντυπωσιακά τα τελευταία χρόνια. Από 52.544 το 2017 σε 1.057.070 το 2024. Είναι όμως αρκετή αυτή η αύξηση για να ανταγωνιστούν τις αμερικανικές, κινεζικές και ιαπωνικές αυτοκινητοβιομηχανίες? Ο Κάρστεν Μπρέσκι, επικεφαλής μακροοικονομικών για την ING Research, διατηρεί τις αμφιβολίες του.
Yeah, when you look at the German automotive industry, clearly this transition from combustion engines to electric vehicles is something the entire industry in Germany has missed. And they are now gradually trying to catch up. The question is whether Germany will be able to really entirely catch up, or whether they will only get halfway. And the story is that Germany's automotive industry has always been pioneering, leading when it comes to the construction, to innovation, to development of automotives. But this cutting edge lead was always in combustion engines. When with the electric vehicles now, China and also others were able to start from scratch. So this is a completely new, also unknown position for the German automotive industry. They are no longer the champions, the leaders, they are the challengers. What will determine the success or the future of the German automotive industry is clearly, are they able to climb up on the supply chain again? Are they able to develop electric vehicles that are state-of-the-art quality, but that they are also state-of-the-art when it comes to meet customers' demands? And they have also changed.
Η Κάρεν Πίτελ είναι καθηγήτρια οικονομικών και διευθύντρια του Κέντρου Ενέργειας, Κλίματος και Πόρων στο IFO Institute, το οικονομικό think tank που βρίσκεται στο Μόναχο. Υποστηρίζει ότι οι γερμανικές αυτοκινητοβιομηχανίες άργησαν να μπουν στην ηλεκτροκίνηση.
How would you evaluate the efforts of the German car industry to transform to electric production, to produce electric cars?
Let's put it like that. It has picked up, but it was definitely late. So I think for a long time, the urgency and the depth of the investment necessarily, and also the knowledge that technologies that had to be developed were perhaps not taken too seriously. So the German car industry definitely was late in that sense, but they are doing, at least within Europe, quite well at the moment. So if you look at the sales of battery electric vehicles, for example, in Europe, German car companies are right at the top of the companies that sell the most cars.
So do you think the goals that have been set up, are they feasible for 15 million cars by 2035 or no internal combustion cars by a certain point? They are set by Germany and by the EU. Are these goals feasible?
It's a really hard question. I think whether they're feasible or not depends on a lot of factors, and that depends on, especially also on the signaling that policy or policymakers actually have. So there's a lot of discussion about actually going back from the mandate or to have only battery electric vehicles in 2035, or at least not having any combustion on fossil fuel-based combustion cars, new ones in 2035. And that, of course, exerts a lot of pressure on the car industry, which is good in the one sense that they actually know they have to invest and they have to catch up. On the other hand, of course, also that they are afraid that their cash cows, the combustion cars, are actually breaking away, and then also the money that they have for investment is going down. So it's a trade-off. I mean, it's really hard to imagine how the EU wants to reach their 90% emission reduction goal by 2040 if the car industry, if the transport sector is not contributing heavily.
Well, competition in general is good for the market and for the consumers. And when it comes to China, I think the significant growth that you're talking about is in the numbers because they start from a very low level. So in general, when you look at the market, their market share is still tiny. For every Chinese car sold in Germany or in Europe, we sell 140 German cars in China. So just to give you a feeling for how big the difference still is. Nevertheless, it's a big competition, and I think the Chinese have learned a lot in this domain and are, especially when it comes to batteries, in a leading situation. So I think we can learn from them, but at the same time we are not at all scared of them because we like the competition, and in Germany 7 out of 10 electrical cars being sold are from our manufacturers, and I think we can build on that and look positive into the future.
Ο Σάιμον Σούτς, εκπρόσωπος του Συνδέσμου Γερμανικών Αυτοκινητοβιομηχανιών, εμφανίζεται αισιόδοξος για το μέλλον των γερμανικών αυτοκινήτων, αλλά ζητάει και παρεμβάσεις από τη γερμανική πολιτεία, έτσι ώστε να φτιαχτεί ένα ρυθμιστικό πλαίσιο που θα ευνοεί την παραγωγή. Ο συνολικός αριθμός των αυτοκινήτων που παρήχθησαν αλλά και πωλήθηκαν στη Γερμανία από τις αυτοκινητοβιομηχανίες της χώρας συνεχώς μειώνεται. Η συνολική παραγωγή αυτοκινήτων στη Γερμανία μειώθηκε από τα 5,6 εκατομμύρια το 2017 σε περίπου 4 εκατομμύρια το 2024.
To produce cheap cars when you look at the costs of energy, of working and everything aside that. But I think we have a momentum, and I can tell you that everyone who has tried electric mobility is a fan. So I think we also have to tell those success stories to convince people.
What are the biggest challenges automakers and suppliers are facing in accelerating this transition right now?
I think of course, it's a general big job to do the transformation from what we did in the past to becoming leading in electric mobility. But I think we have a lot of good numbers. I mean, we are the world's second biggest producer in Europe, by far the biggest producer of electric cars. Every second electrical car sold in Europe is from a German manufacturer. But as I said before, I think we did our homework. Now it's important that the framework goes along. And then it's also the general competitiveness of the European location side when it comes to bureaucracy, to energy prices, to how fast do we deliver, how fast are the processes. There's lots of things to do. And also when it comes to digitalization and artificial intelligence, I think Europe has to approach those topics with a different mentality.
Απευθυνθήκαμε σε δύο μέλη του Γερμανικού Κοινοβουλίου, τον Klaus Wiener από το CDU και τον Jörg Sezan από το Die Linke. Τους ρωτήσαμε πώς βλέπουν την γερμανική αυτοκινητοβιομηχανία σε μια εποχή γεμάτη προκλήσεις. Germany's car industry is a cornerstone for its economy. How well do you think the major automakers are adapting to the shift towards electrification and climate neutrality?
Well, I think that after having perhaps a bit of a rough start, what I see right now is that they're making tremendous progress. As a matter of fact, the cars are much better, both in terms of the amount of kilometers you can go with one battery load and also the technical equipment. I myself, I drive an electrical car, and I have to say it's a German car, and I'm quite pleased with it.
When we think of Germany, we all think of the global leader in automobile. What has changed in the last 5 years and so? What is the problem associated with the automobile industry?
To be honest, it's still large. It's a very important part of the German economy and still quite successful, but they didn't find the right timing to switch from being the worldwide leader for combustion engines to switch to electricity. And even today, you wouldn't find a model from a German manufacturer for small or medium-sized cars. And that's a huge problem. All the manufacturers, they relied up till now to produce very large, very strong cars, very fast cars. German obsession with driving fast on Autobahn, which is not the way forward for the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. The German industry has underperformed in the last, let's say, 2 or 3 years. In particular, the energy-intensive industry has lost nearly 20% of its production since the energy crisis. That has had a large impact on the German growth. At the same time, what we also saw is that exports and investment, if you look at the distribution of gross domestic product, then exports and investment are underperforming in the last years. It's true, the cheap energy, particularly from the east, has helped the German industry to grow, but it was not the only factor. And there are currently structural problems of the German economy, particularly the German industry.
Η απώλεια του φθηνού φυσικού αερίου που ερχόταν από τη Ρωσία είναι ένας από τους βασικούς λόγους που η γερμανική βιομηχανία έχασε την ανταγωνιστικότητά της, υποστηρίζουν οι αναλυτές. Σε συνδυασμό με τις δεσμεύσεις της χώρας αλλά και τις επιταγές της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης για πράσινη μετάβαση, η Γερμανία αναγκάζεται να επανεξετάσει όχι μόνο τι κατασκευάζει, αλλά και πώς και για ποιον. Η καθηγήτρια οικονομικών Κάρεν Πίτελ επισημαίνει ότι μπορεί να προκύψει ξανά μια τέτοια ενεργειακή κρίση, όπως αυτή που προκάλεσε η εισβολή της Ρωσίας στην Ουκρανία.
So far, it's mainly basically European cars and German cars that are in the non-combustion sector active in Germany. So the sales of BYD, for example, are not very high yet. So there is a certain tendency to go for like the old brands that you're used to. Green policies are in a sense disrupting because you cannot go on with your usual business model, so you have to adapt. And there's a way to make that more efficient and to make that less efficient. Of course, there is going to be structural change. There's no way around that. And I think that's a message that politicians don't really like. So it's really hard to imagine in the future, for example, to have a mass production of certain chemicals in Germany, which are energy intensive. At the moment, you have the feeling that there is the aim to keep everything as it is, and then there's of course less money available for example, supporting certain industries, potentially over a certain time only, or hopefully over a certain time only it will be necessary, like the car industry, and actually transforming their business model. So you have to kind of pick and choose, pick winners in a sense, although economists always go for technology neutral and you have to be open, but in some sense, if there is deep investment necessary, a kickstart is sometimes required. I mean, the danger is always, once you had an event like the gas crisis and the supply from Russia crisis, that you kind of focus on the same stuff for the future, but of course it might come from a completely different source in the future. There might be disruptions in the Atlantic of the supply from there. There might be pipeline issues from Norway. There might be something on the oil markets or coal markets. Nobody really looks at that.
Ποια είναι η πολιτική της νέας κυβέρνησης για την ενέργεια? Ποιες είναι οι διαρθρωτικές κινήσεις που χρειάζεται η χώρα για να μπορεί η βιομηχανία της να συνεχίσει να παράγει με ανταγωνιστικούς όρους?
Germany has been heavily dependent on Russian natural gas. And therefore, energy prices soared after the start of the war, and many German manufacturers had, up till now, huge problems to readjust their energy sources.
I think part of the success story will be to secure energy which is clean, which is securely delivered, but at the same time comes at affordable prices. That's something we are working a lot on right now, and the key to success in my mind is to increase supply of energy. So perhaps in contrast to the former government, we are technologically open. In the short term, we will use everything we can in order to increase the supply of energy, while over the medium to longer term, I think the mix will depend heavily on renewables, while at the same time, I think hydrogen will also play a role. We will also use gas and coal, but along with what we call carbon capture. I think that should be the strategy. I think that the former government has led to a bit of uncertainty among companies and also private households by ambition to become climate neutral, but in a way in which companies and households, I think, felt they were overburdened.
I think in general the whole energy crisis has shown that resilience is a very important factor now and in the future. So you should never depend only on one source. But at the same time, Germany has to learn, if you want to become more resilient, you can also not, switch out of other energy forms at the same time where you don't have enough energy from other resources. So of course, renewable energy is the way to go, but we need to think about what do we do when, for example, the sun's not shining, when there is no wind. So we need to be prepared for those situations as well. I think that is a topic where we need more Europe. A European energy market would be something that would be really helpful for all over Europe. And I think in general, we really need to think about how can we become more resilient? Should we also have energy partnerships with other regions in the world where it's easier to have renewable energies produced? And I think those are the main takeaways that we took from this lesson.
Η απώλεια του φθηνού φυσικού αερίου από τη Ρωσία δεν είναι ο μόνος λόγος που η γερμανική οικονομία βρίσκεται σε ύφεση. Οι αναλυτές υποστηρίζουν ότι ακόμα και πριν το 2022 είχαν διαφανεί τα δομικά προβλήματα της χώρας, η γραφειοκρατία, η έλλειψη επενδύσεων και εργατικού δυναμικού. Πλάι σε αυτά και οι αλλαγές στις εμπορικές σχέσεις με την Κίνα, η οποία από πελάτη των γερμανικών εξαγωγών μετατράπηκε σε ανταγωνιστή, αφού οι κινέζικες εταιρείες ξεκίνησαν να παράγουν οι ίδιες τα προϊόντα που εισήγαγαν από τη Γερμανία.
Energy prices is one important aspect in that, but then also there's a lot of aspects that are not necessarily related to energy or climate. For example, bureaucracy. So many of the processes that are really fast in other countries, especially outside of Europe, are very slow here. Then also, of course, we have a lack of skilled labor. That affects a lot of companies, and then also uncertainty regarding the future with respect to energy prices, but also with respect to climate policy, for example, that's causing a lot of uncertainty and then also hesitancy regarding investment.
Why is Germany currently lagging behind other G7 economies? And do you think the sick man of Europe label is justified?
There are longer-term reasons for the weakness of the German economy. And one is underinvestment. So Germany has clearly fallen behind when it comes to international competitiveness over the last 10, 15 years due to having invested too little. And the other structural factor is China. So China has clearly transitioned from a growth driver for the German economy, as in the past Germany benefited from Chinese demand for German cars, German manufacturing. But now, over the last couple of years, China has become the better Germany. So China is able to produce cars, China is able to produce manufacturing goods at the same or even better quality than Germany did, but at a much lower price. So this changing role of China is also a structural reason for Germany's economic weakness.
We need a tremendous loss of bureaucracy. That is something that really also is bad for investments, and especially the suppliers and all the little companies can't handle the bureaucracy anymore. That doesn't even cost money to reduce it. Then the energy prices, they can't be 3 to 5 times higher than in the US or in China. And the other thing is a mentality towards how you push transformation. I think Europe has way too much thought that regulation is a competitive advantage, but it's not. It is really a disadvantage, especially when it comes to AI and digitalization. If you want to do rules for everything before even starting, that will really not release innovation. It will rather hinder it. So I think a general mentality approach and energy and bureaucracy, those are the 3 things that are most urgent.
We have demographic change. That is, we lack skilled labor force, and the labor force in total is forecasted to decline next year for the first time. This decline we would have seen this decline earlier, but there were refugees coming in 2015, and also from the Russian-Ukraine war that we've seen. That actually compensated our loss of labor force.
Από τη μία υπάρχει έλλειψη εξειδικευμένου προσωπικού. Από την άλλη, ο μετασχηματισμός της γερμανικής βιομηχανίας θα έχει ως αποτέλεσμα την απώλεια πολλών θέσεων εργασίας. Έκθεση του Γερμανικού Υπουργείου Οικονομίας που δημοσιεύτηκε το 2019 προβλέπει ότι μέχρι το 2030 η ηλεκτροκίνηση των οχημάτων θα μπορούσε να οδηγήσει σε απώλεια πάνω από 100.000 θέσεων εργασίας στην αυτοκινητοβιομηχανία. Ενώ μελέτη του Συνδέσμου Γερμανικών Αυτοκινητοβιομηχανιών ανεβάζει τον αριθμό στις 190.000 μέχρι το 2035. Αναφέροντας επίσης ότι το 1/4 αυτών, 47.500 θέσεις, είχαν ήδη χαθεί μέχρι το τέλος του 2024. Στον αντίποδα, στους αναπτυσσόμενους κλάδους ηλεκτρονικών, λογισμικού, πληροφορικής και τεχνητής νοημοσύνης θα δημιουργηθούν δεκάδες χιλιάδες θέσεις εργασίας, αλλά κανείς δεν ξέρει αν θα ισοσταθμίσουν τις χαμένες θέσεις και αν θα βρεθούν οι εργαζόμενοι με τις κατάλληλες γνώσεις και ικανότητες για την εποχή της ηλεκτροκίνησης.
This transformation requires retraining and reskilling of BMW's employees.
Not only this transformation is important for that. Don't forget, we are already producing fully electric cars, we are producing plug-in hybrid cars, and therefore we already have trainings and qualification for our employees. And for the future, we continuously improving the knowledge and the qualification of our employees. So we are on a good run. There is no special training for them because it's a continuous process here at the BMW Group.
What does the shift to electrical vehicle production mean for the plant's workforce?
We informed and communicated the transformation already in 2020. The last engine of the engine plant was produced at the end of 2023, 3 years later. So we had the time for the communication, for the information, and so we can take all our employees with us on this journey.
There is a huge demand for qualified personnel all over the different industries. So therefore, it's not so much that individual workers will lose their jobs. Many of them might get good jobs somewhere else. That's not the main point. But if you close a factory in a region where it is maybe the largest producer and the place with the most working places, then you have regional problems. The individual workers might find new work, but for the region, that's a problem.
One of the concerns surrounding the green transition is employment, of course. Estimates suggest that the electronic vehicles production requires fewer workers than combustion engines. How is the sector preparing for this shift, and what measures are being taken to ensure, of course, the social cohesion here in Germany.
Yes, that is true. With the switch to electrification, jobs will be lost because it's just a different process. But now it is decisive, where will the new jobs be located? Our industry is investing very high amounts of money, 320 billions in the next 4 years in research and development, and other 150 in just rebuilding all of our factories. So when you look at these numbers, in the end, where those investments will be taken depends on the competitiveness of the location. So about AI and all the possibilities coming with artificial intelligence, with digitalization, there will be a lot of new jobs created. We want those jobs to be here in Germany and in Europe, but at the same time, if the competitiveness will not increase by really tremendous terms, some of those investments might go elsewhere, and then you will see the development in the jobs numbers in the next couple of years, and then it's hard to reverse this process.
Some of the jobs that's actually are going to be lost in industry are going to go somewhere else. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, there's going to be, or there is already, and there's going to be a boom in energy and renewables. In construction, we need better insulated houses, we need different types of heating. So there's a lot of jobs that are actually, a lot of people needed in these sectors. The problem is basically that the skills not necessarily match. And so you have to do a lot of retraining, for example, in order to kind of overcome this labor shortage in the supply of skilled labor beyond the sheer numbers, also dealing with the qualification issues.
Is there a strategy in place that says that we're going to lose this amount of jobs in this sector, but we have to create in this sector?
To my feeling, not at the level we would need it. Because, I mean, if you, on the one hand, you don't acknowledge that there is going to be structural change, then you don't put into place the structures that you actually need to overcome that structural change. And so to my feeling, there could be more actually effort and also honesty be involved, and actually acknowledging that you have to retrain people, and not everybody will end their working life in the occupation they started it with. So I think that's still a massive challenge, because it's also something people, of course, don't like. I mean, it's nicer to stay in the job you once learned.
Η κυβέρνηση συνασπισμού που προέκυψε από τις εκλογές του Φεβρουαρίου έχει ήδη ανακοινώσει μέτρα για την βελτίωση των αριθμών στα οικονομικά της Γερμανίας. Είναι ενδεικτικό ότι η συμφωνία για συγκυβέρνηση μεταξύ των χριστιανοδημοκρατών και των σοσιαλδημοκρατών υπό τον νέο καγκελάριο Φρίντριχ Μέρτς υπεγράφει σε μια εμβληματική βιομηχανική τοποθεσία, ξεκαθαρίζοντας έτσι τη σημασία της βαριάς βιομηχανίας για τον κυβερνητικό συνασπισμό. Από τα πρώτα πράγματα που έκανε η νέα κυβέρνηση ήταν να ανακοινώσει ένα ειδικό ταμείο για την επένδυση 500 δισεκατομμυρίων ευρώ στις υποδομές της χώρας και για την επίτευξη κλιματικής ουδετερότητας τα επόμενα 12 χρόνια.
Deutschland ist zurück. Es lohnt sich wieder in Deutschland zu investieren. Wir sind kein Standort der Vergangenheit, sondern ein Standort der Gegenwart und vor allem der Zukunft. Diese Bundesregierung will Deutschland wieder nach vorn bringen. Wir wollen Investitionen ermöglichen in neue Technologien und Innovationen.
First of all, I think we see a change in business sentiment. Companies think that given the new government, we will now have a more pragmatic approach to the issues at hand. Ranging from energy towards migration and everything. We have what we call the Sondervermögen, the special fund, in which we try to increase also public investment regarding our infrastructure, which needs to improve. Underinvestment was the name of the game over the last years. I think now, from now on, we will spend a lot more on infrastructure as well.
The main positive factor is the new government, with our help and the help of the Greens, introduced a so-called special fund for the government to use to promote stabilization of the economy and restructuring the public infrastructure, which is badly in need of repair in many areas. This is really a push forward, and this will have an effect, I'm very sure.
The government's plan to spend 500 billion euro in infrastructure over the next 12 years is a huge U-turn in how the German governments look at fiscal policy. It is a huge U-turn on fiscal policy in Europe in general, because it is a sign that Germany finally realizes it has to spend a bit more. So these 500 billion euro will clearly make a difference. But let's not forget, there are estimates from think tanks putting the size of the investment gap in Germany at 600 billion euro. The only question is, this money alone will not make the entire German economy more competitive again. It is a start, clearly. Also need to find the right sectors, the right products, the right services in which the German economy can return as a world leader, because otherwise Germany will only have a very modern infrastructure, but no German cars driving on this infrastructure, no German companies producing services and products that can use this infrastructure. So it would only be halfway.
Η νέα γερμανική κυβέρνηση έθεσε ακόμη έναν στόχο: να φτιάξει τον ισχυρότερο στρατό στην Ευρώπη, και αυτό σημαίνει νέες ευκαιρίες ανάπτυξης της βιομηχανίας, αυτή τη φορά στον τομέα κατασκευής στρατιωτικών υλικών.
And I understand also that Germany is on its way to become a war machine. Not a war machine,
yeah,
I mean
invest more in defense.
Invest more in defense.
Absolutely, yes. In some sense, unfortunately. I mean, we are not far here from the Berlin Wall, which came down in 1989, and I think we were all happy that we could reap what was called the peace dividend. Yeah, it's good to spend money on schools and hospitals rather than tanks. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that the world has changed. And we need to make sure now, not only Germany, but I think Europe as a whole, we need to make sure that we have the ability to defend ourselves to an extent that we will never be in a position that we have to defend ourselves, actually. That's the idea, and that's why we'll spend more money now on defense.
And is there consensus in Germany on that?
Fairly broad, yes. Even the Green Party, which has started back in the 80s on what I would call a peace agenda, is still a peace agenda, I mean, to be fair, but they're much more open than they perhaps were a couple of decades ago regarding rearmament of the German defense sector.
Germany is said to spend a lot on defense. Will the German car industries leave the car production and shift to defense?
We are indeed seeing already now a shift of the traditional manufacturing sector into defense. But the thing is, currently, the size of the German defense industry is something like 0.5% of the entire German economy. The size of the automotive industry is something between 5 and 7% of the GDP. So the German economy will also, luckily, not become a war economy from overnight. We will see that especially suppliers in the automotive industry will start to diversify their production, and that they will also start producing for the military industry over the next couple of years. But this is a long shot. So a bit more diversification, yes, but Germany will need more than only guns and weapons in order to return as a competitive economy.
Οι προβλέψεις για τη γερμανική οικονομία είναι συγκρατημένα αισιόδοξες, καθώς για το 2025 οι ρυθμοί ανάπτυξης του ΑΕΠ προβλέπεται να κινηθούν πάλι κοντά στο 0, αλλά για το 2026 οι οικονομολόγοι προβλέπουν θετικούς ρυθμούς. Όσο και να θέλουν οι οικονομολόγοι να κάνουν ασφαλείς προβλέψεις, το ασταθές γεωπολιτικό περιβάλλον και ειδικά η παρουσία του Ντόναλντ Τραμπ στο Λευκό Οίκο κάνει κάθε εκτίμηση παρακινδυνευμένη. Η ανακοίνωση των δασμών ύψους 30% για προϊόντα που εισάγονται στις ΗΠΑ από την Ευρώπη θορύβησε αρκετά τις γερμανικές επιχειρήσεις, αφού οι ΗΠΑ είναι μακράν η μεγαλύτερη αγορά παγκοσμίως για τα γερμανικά προϊόντα, αντιπροσωπεύοντας περίπου το 10,4% των συνολικών εξαγωγών της χώρας το 2024. και με ποσοστό 17% των εξαγωγών, τα αυτοκίνητα και τα ανταλλακτικά αυτοκινήτων ήταν το κυριότερο εξαγωγικό προϊόν της Γερμανίας το 2024.
No one knows, no one can predict how this tariff war might end up between the United States, Europe, China, etc. But if I were to ask you what is the basic scenario that you work on with the world trade in a situation where a percentage of tariffs will be imposed in the end, what will be the immediate effects to the German economy?
So in our latest forecast at the DIW, we had the assumption that we will reach a trade agreement with the US. Once you assume such an agreement, the domestic effects on the European economy are rather limited. Because what you should not forget is the single countries within the EU, most of them have trade that is 50% with other EU economies, and only something like 10 or a little over 10% with the US, and that's for Germany, which has already the highest share.
Tariffs, needless to say, that I think the best of all worlds is to have zero tariffs. I'm an economist by training, and I learned early on that trade benefits all parties involved. I think the issue should be what can we do within our region to make sure that the gains from trade that we can have, that we distribute more broadly.
US announced 30% tariffs for products coming from EU countries. How this will affect the German economy?
The US tariffs are clearly bad news for the German economy. Especially for the German economy, the US is extremely important. These tariffs are a big risk, not only for the German, but for the entire European economy, because they would clearly risk that then Germany would be in the third year in a row in a small recession this year.
Ποιο είναι το μέλλον λοιπόν για τη Γερμανία? Θα μπορέσει η μεγαλύτερη οικονομία της Ευρώπης να οδηγήσει τη γυραιά Ήπειρο στη νέα εποχή, αυτή της ραγδαίας τεχνολογικής εξέλιξης, αλλά και των δραματικών γεωπολιτικών εξελίξεων?
So you think that Germany can remain the power engine of Europe, the industrial leader of Europe, but also move to greener solutions or to more climate neutral solutions?
I think that Germany can retain quite a substantial share of its GDP out of the industry. At the moment we have about 20% of GDP that comes out of industry. That's higher than most of the other European countries. But certain aspects of that industrial base are probably not going to be here in the future, but there might be others. I mean, there's like potential winners of the transformation, like energy efficient equipment machinery, like circular economy equipment measures, etc. Also the building up, of course, of circular economy within Germany. This is industrial base. That's not necessarily the same mass production, but sometimes higher value production.
What is your base scenario for next year? How do you think the German economy will do in terms of progress and in terms of GDP raise?
I think the German economy will improve a lot. In our DIW summer forecast, we forecasted the growth of the German economy to be for this year 0.3% and for the next year 1.7%. And this large expansion next year is of course due to the massive fiscal impulse that will start to have an effect on the economy. And having said that, when you look further into the future, we also forecast that beyond 26 we will see much higher growth rates than we've seen in the last 3 years.
Πριν από 75 χρόνια η Γερμανία προσπαθούσε να χτίσει νέα θεμέλια πάνω στις τάχτες και την τραγωδία του Δευτέρου Παγκοσμίου Πολέμου. Το ατσάλι, το γυαλί, η καινοτομία, ο σχεδιασμός και τα εργατικά χέρια συνδυάστηκαν σε μια ρυθμισμένη και ρυθμική παραγωγή που οδήγησε στο οικονομικό θαύμα του δεύτερου μισού του 20ου αιώνα.
Doch wenn nicht heute, wann denn dann? Denn irgendwann ist auch ein Traum zu lange her.
Σήμερα η χώρα βρίσκεται στο κατόφλι ενός μετασχηματισμού. Οι προκλήσεις της Γερμανίας είναι πραγματικές. Το βιομηχανικό της μοντέλο δοκιμάζεται. Η οικονομία της βρίσκεται υπό πίεση. Θα μπορέσει άραγε να βρει το ρυθμό που θα την οδηγήσει στο μέλλον?
Was getan ist, ist getan. Was jetzt ist,